Imagine this. You are chilling by your private backyard pool, not bothering a soul, when suddenly the HOA that you are not even a part of sends you a demand to drain the pool. They hit me with fines, threats, and even tried to get my mortgage company involved to take away my property. Instead of backing down, I found a way to turn their biggest power play completely against them, and it all centered around their precious community pool. And the title HOA Karen story starts like this. So I live on the outskirts of a so-called luxury community governed by one of the most obnoxious and self-important HOAs you could imagine. If the number of stories out there are any indication, then you know the type of power: hungry men and bored housewives writing violation notices because someone's lawn gnome is clearly going to cause some crisis, or a garage door had a little bit of chip paint that nobody else would even notice. When I bought my property 5 years ago, I made absolutely sure it was not part of that HOA. My land was originally part of a larger area owned by a local developer who happened to build homes both within and outside of the HOA. Hearing that I was not going to be in the HOA was music to my ears. I wanted peace and privacy, not monthly fees and possible fights over things that did not matter. I built my home exactly the way I wanted, which is modest but modern with a beautiful backyard pool. It is not flashy, just clean and well-designed. It is my sanctuary, and since I work remotely, I get to enjoy it almost daily. The best part: no arbitrary rules, no surprise inspections, no letters threatening legal action if I plant the wrong type of shrub. So it is just me, my dog, a cold drink, and the occasional floating speaker. Now, the community pool was the HOA's big selling point, and it is a few blocks away from me. I go past it on walks with my dogs sometimes. It is always overcrowded in summer with screaming kids and irritated parents jostling for lounge chairs. I have never set foot inside, not because I couldn't, but because I would rather relax in my own backyard than deal with that circus. Now here's the kicker though. The land where the HOA built that community pool, it was not even theirs. It was leased and from the same developer who once owned my lot. A little known fact, apparently, since most of the residents assume the pool is part of their sacred dominion. The lease agreement was quietly renewed every few years, and since I had no interest in it, I never paid much attention as I did to most things that went out my business until the HOA decided to overstep. I kept to myself, lived quietly, and never engaged with the HOA or its board. I was on good terms with a few neighbors, but I did not join community events or attend meetings. My property taxes were paid, my landscaping was immaculate, and I did not owe anyone in that HOA a single thing. Basically living the dream, I would say. Well, anyway, I was mostly invisible, but not considered creepy or unfriendly, just how I wanted it. Unfortunately, that peace was shattered when the HOA got a new president. Let's call her Karen because, let's be real, the only people that act like her are Karens. She swept into the role with a thirst for control and a ton of new ideas. Suddenly, the HOA newsletter was full of bolded regulations and veiled threats about maintaining aesthetic standards. She even started going around taking photos of people's yards. I obviously don't get the newsletter delivered, but she has a box of them outside the community pool, so I grabbed one. At first, I just shook my head and ignored it. Let them squabble over mailbox heights and fence styles. That was not my world, and I'm not the guy to start fights for other people. But it turns out that Karen did not like being ignored. She noticed my pool while walking her yeppy little dog past my property. I caught her one afternoon taking photos through the gaps in my fence. This was my first interaction with her. Me, can I help you with something? Karen, I was just looking. Me? Well, I suggest that you move on now that you have looked. She walked away and I did not think to stop her and demand the photos deleted or a better explanation for herself. But I should have. Well, that moment was the first domino, the beginning of a petty war that would escalate far beyond anything I expected. Here's the thing. When someone picks a fight with me on my own property over something I have no control over at all, I don't roll over and let myself be kicked. I stand my ground, and if they are stupid enough to keep pushing, they are going to learn the consequences. If it did not start with her taking the pictures, then it started with a letter. Not a friendly neighborhood letter about where the 4th of July fireworks would be, or a flyer for a lost cat, both of which I've gotten before. No, this was an official letter printed on obnoxiously heavy paper with the HOS crest embossed at the top, like they were some kind of royal authority. I swear it was as if I was getting a letter telling me that I got accepted into Hogwarts or something. I suppose with Karen being Voldemort or something. Anyway, inside the tone was condescending and aggressive. They were informing me that my unauthorized aquatic structure was in violation of community standards, and it must be drained and decommissioned immediately. Seriously, though, they couldn't have just called it a pool. They had to act like pretentious Assads. I had to read it a few times to make sure that I was not either hallucinating, dreaming, or got somebody else's mail. But no, the letter listed my name, my address, and even had photos of my private backyard pool attached. It cited specific aesthetic guidelines and threatened escalating daily fines and further action up to and including eviction if I did not comply. They essentially banned my pool from the neighborhood. What the hell is wrong with these people? I will admit that at first I was laughing, but at the word eviction, I started to get worried. It was completely out of line and had more audacity than almost anything else I've ever seen in my life. I must have stood there stunned for 5 minutes and then the anger kicked in. I was not in the HOA and my property was never moved into their jurisdiction. My deed, plot map, and purchase agreement all clearly stated that I was exempt from their rules. I had exactly zero to do with the homeowner association, and yet they sent me this letter. Still, I decided to give them the benefit of the doubt. And well, guys, as seasoned HOA Reddit veterans, we all know you never give the benefit of the doubt to the HOA. Or well, would you, if you were in an OP situation, would you still give them the benefit of the doubt after everything that we know about HOAs? Let me know in the comments. And by the way, while you're still at it, please don't forget to like the video because it would help me tremendously. Thank you so much. Well, anyway, looking back on it, a stupid moment on my part. Surely this was just a misunderstanding. Maybe a clerical error. I knew they had a new president, and maybe she did not know that my house was not within the HOA. So then I called the HOA office and asked to speak to whoever had sent the letter. I was told that was impossible, and the only way I was allowed to contest the violation was to go to the monthly HOA meeting. So I marked my calendar and gathered every piece of legal documentation I had. If they wanted this to happen in front of an audience, then I would be happy to comply. When the meeting night came, I walked into the community center conference room that smelled of stale coffee. Half the audience was elderly people in folding chairs, clutching coffee cups. The other half looked half asleep and like they would rather be anywhere else. The board sat at a long table up front and at the center wearing a blazer like she was chairing Congress, said Karen. Well, and if one Harry Potter reference in this story is not enough, you can think of her as a Professor Umbridge. I introduced myself during the public comment portion and calmly explained the situation. I laid out my property deeds, the official county plat, and a letter from the title company confirming that I was outside the HOA's jurisdiction. I even showed a signed document from the original developer that specifically excluded my lot from the HOA covenant. I did not want to be rude here, was still thinking it was some kind of simple mistake. Karen, well, regardless of what your paperwork says, your pool is visible from several community homes. It disrupts the uniform look we are trying to maintain here. So I'm afraid you will need to comply or face the consequences. Me, I'm not going to be draining my pool as I broke no rule in this county. I have the right to own and maintain a pool. Those are the only laws I'm required to follow. Karen, don't force us to set an example out of you. Be good and drain the pool, or we are going to have serious problems. Me, trust me when I say, if I get a single fine or another letter, then my next step is legal action. Goodbye. They did not care about the fact that I was not even part of the HOA. They only cared about control, not wanting a single person to be living free and other people seeing it happen. It might cause others to realize they want freedom from the strict HOA rules too. It did not take long for the harassment to ramp up after that meeting. I thought maybe, just maybe, once I laid out the legal facts, they would back off and quietly back off. But well, instead it was like waving a red flag in front of a bull. She got angrier and wanted to show that she was better than me. The first wave came in the form of weekly violation notices. Even though I was not a member of their HOA, they kept dropping these annoying things in my mailbox, each one more aggressive than the last one. Final notice was stamped across one in bold red ink. Another claimed that I was being fined $500 a day for so-called non-compliance. Next came the phone calls not from the HOA officially, but always an anonymous, deeply concerned citizen telling me that I should think about getting rid of my pool or that I'm ruining a perfectly good neighborhood before hanging up. Yeah, that's not creepy or anything. Personally, I think the HOA should be the one getting told that they ruined a neighborhood instead. I didn't believe that it could get worse than the letters, but they contacted my mortgage provider. That crossed a serious line. I got a call from my lender asking why there were reports of ongoing code violations at my property, and if I was aware of a potential lien on my property being discussed since the loan provider is a normal company. It just took sending over the legal documents the HOA ignored to clear it up. The woman I spoke to seemed as angry as I did and promised me that they would not be able to put a lien on my property. Around this point, I came to the realization that just being in the right was not going to be enough. She was not going to stop harassing or bullying me, and who knew how far she was going to ramp things up before it hit a boiling point. I did not want to just be right. I wanted to make her stop, and that was going to take some digging. I did not want to destroy her in court about my property. I wanted to find something even bigger. It began innocently enough, though. I remembered that the community pool, their pride and joy, was not actually on HOA-owned land. I had heard something about a lease when I first moved in, but I never investigated the details. All that information is public, so I went to the county office and requested property records. Once I had those, I could make a few phone calls and found something that would lead to my ultimate revenge. The land where the HOA pool sat was indeed leased, not owned. The original developer still held the title. That same developer that sold me my plot of land too, so I knew who he was and how to contact him easily. Plus, I found that the lease they had was up in a year before they would need to lease it again. I called the developer and asked if he would be willing to meet with me for lunch for a business discussion. Now, he was actually a really nice man, and I didn't feel like I had to hide what I was going through or why I wanted the information from him. He was able to give me the exact expiration date of the lease. We talked for a few minutes about me putting my hat in the ring to lease it, but then I got a much better idea. I know you don't have too many properties left. Would this be one that you were interested in flat out selling? If that was the kind of bid I was wanting to put down, developer with a good enough offer, yes, I would not mind offloading it. And that was when everything shifted. I had the high ground. Now, while Karen and her little minions were busy writing me fake citations and taking pictures of my property, I was negotiating to buy the ground beneath their precious community oasis. I was not telling them anything, of course. I was not even going to meetings to fight the fines that they were giving me. I realized also the more that I ignored Karen, the more aggressive her approach seemed to be. The letters were coming more often, and I was laughing at her attempt at serious wording and final notices and lien threats. I started a folder, actually several, one for physical letters and one for emails, one for voicemails which I recorded and transcribed, another one for photos of Karen standing on the sidewalk outside my fence with her phone raised like she was scouting for drone strikes. She would walk by on her afternoon constitutional with her dog and take pictures of my pool, my yard, and even my trash bins. She was busy writing me fines, and I was just having a fun time color-coding everything she sent me. I was biding my time and getting some free evidence hand-delivered to me by her the entire time. Meanwhile, my deal with the developer was quietly progressing. The man was semi-retired and tired of dealing with the HOA. Apparently, they tried to lowball him on previous lease renewals, acting like they were doing him some big favor just by leasing it to begin with. He was fine with me buying it outright and was not even going to give the HOA an option to bid on buying it. He wanted the paperwork done fast and the entire thing out of his hair. We signed the initial purchase agreement and set a closing date just a few weeks after the HOA's lease would expire. Everything was airtight. My lawyer, who was very amused by the situation, made sure the title transfer would be clean and legally unambiguous. We even prepared a formal notice of lease termination to be delivered immediately after the lease expired. I also found out personally that Karen seemed to get angrier the nicer and happier I seem. I started waving at her when she was passing by my house, replying to their emails with compliments on their language or dedication to keep emailing me daily. Staying quiet about the entire thing was killing me inside, but I didn't want to let it slip to a soul about what I was doing. They didn't know it yet, but they were hosting pool parties on land that they were about to lose, collecting access fees for a community asset that would soon be private property. Still petting themselves on the back, though, for every small thing they did while I waited, smiling for the clock to run out. I saw flyers talking about their pool party, which was a day I would already own it by. The day the lease officially expired was a quiet Tuesday. No big events, no pool parties, no fireworks. Just an unceremonious click of time, and suddenly the HOA no longer had any legal claim to the land their community pool was sitting on. That same morning, I closed on the property, title transferred, paper signed, deed recorded with a county by lunchtime. The HOA was hereby notified that their lease had not been renewed. All access to the pool area was revoked, effective immediately. According to the developer, the HOA had not even sent anything about the lease renewal. Usually the developer had to ask them about it, which he would not do now. Well, within hours, my phone lit up like crazy, first with unknown numbers and then with emails from the HOA's legal committee. But I ignored them. They had no leg to stand on. The lease was over, the land was mine, and their claims were as empty as the pool was about to be. Now I had to make sure that I protected the area from HOA scum. Actually, ignored them just meant I let it go to voicemail so I could listen to it all later. This legal committee was claiming that they believed I had been scammed, sold the property by somebody that didn't own it, because the HOA owned it. Oh, how I love lies getting worse and worse as things get more desperate. I hired a crew to install a 6-foot privacy fence around the entire pool area. No trespassing signs were posted at every entrance. I even added a code-locked gate with a keypad just to make the point extra clear for them. Karen was not getting into that pool no matter how many keys she had. The way was locked out, and I mentally dared anybody to try getting in. Really, it was a smart idea on my part to pay extra to put a rush on that fence. She showed up that evening, banging on the little locked gate, screaming to see the property manager. I'm sure after trying and failing to use her keys to open the gate. Me? That would be me. Karen, you're disrupting the harmony. The community needs their pool, and this is HOA land. Me? It's really not. You did not get the lease renewed and I just bought the land? Check with the county if you want, or try reading the fine print on your lease. Karen, I will sue you. Me? Go ahead, waste more money. I can give you my lawyer's email if you want. The next meeting was reportedly a disaster. I did not go, of course, but word traveled fast. And by the way, guys, if you enjoy these HOA stories and would like me to read more, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because lately I realized that a lot of you guys that are watching are actually not subscribed to my channel and therefore don't get my daily videos recommended. So please change that if you would. Thank you so much. Dozens of angry residents showed up demanding to know why they could not access the pool that they had paid fees for. Karen tried to spin it, saying it was an ongoing dispute, but they knew the truth. The HOA lost the land. Apparently, things got so heated that the meeting had to be cut short. People demanded refunds for their pool fees. Others wanted Karen to step down. Not a single one cared about Karen's story about me ruining things. Of course, I could not escape the fact that the residents were going to call and email me. Some were angry that they no longer had a pool to go to. Others were understanding. A lot were just curious as to what happened, and I was the best place to get the full story. They were mainly just angry at the HOA and wanting refunds for the thing they paid for and we're not going to get. The pool was the main reason their monthly dues were so high to begin with. Karen predictably tried to spin the narrative. People got sent an email, which I managed to have a friendly neighbor show me. She was claiming that some outsider exploited a legal loophole in order to steal the HOA property, adding on for good measure that this person was probably also crazy and going to use the land for illegal purposes. Going as far as to promise that she was going to get the pool back and not to worry about it, that the opening day would get pushed and the people would be getting a huge party, promising free food to make up for the fact that it was going to be later than expected. A very bold move, and an even bolder lie. The next board meeting was the stuff of legends, though. So, apparently over 70 residents showed up, crammed into the community center like they were giving something away. People were shouting over each other because they wanted to be the ones to speak. One guy stood up and waved his canceled pool access bill in the air, asking how they were going to fix it. Another woman asked if the board had even read the lease agreement. Karen was telling them again that it was just my fault that I refused to drain my pool, and because of that, they lost the lease, trying to shift all the blame onto somebody that was not even there. Finally, she had to flat out admit to people that she couldn't get the pool back, that her promises were all wrong, and there was not going to be a pool this summer, or probably ever again. Trying to spin that they could all chip in some extra money on their dues, and the HOA could try and buy different land, and then start over. That went over about as well as you would expect. My source in the HOA was there and told me everybody was on their feet complaining at the idea of spending even more money. A vote of no confidence was called right then and there. 3 board members resigned on the spot and Karen tried to hold firm, but somebody was reading out the lease agreement showing that Karen should have renewed the lease 6 months ago. Her blaming me clearly was not going to work. Within a month, Karen was out. The HOA board that was left was dealing with a total mess. They issued partial refunds for pool access, but the damage was done. Residents were pissed, lawsuits were threatened, etc. As for the pool, I did not drain it. I cleaned it, retiled the edge, put in new lounges and umbrellas, and I installed a retractable awning, added some lighting, and hired a local landscaper to refresh the space. It was my pool now, and I have to admit that it looked pretty damn good. My friends loved it. I invited them over for a little grand reopening party. We floated around with drinks in hand while music played. I was living the dream at that moment. A few residents approached me later, asking if I would consider letting them use the pool for a fee, but I politely declined. Not out of spite, but because if I did that, then this would be a business. That would mean a lot more work and fees on my part, insurance if somebody gets hurt, and who knows what else. It's been about 6 months since I bought the land, and there's actually been a lot of change. So I'm glad I waited. Well, okay, actually procrastinated writing this story. So now Karen is gone, not just off the board, but out of the neighborhood entirely. Rumor has it that she moved to a different community about 20 miles away. She could not deal with the backlash she had gotten over the entire thing. She was blamed by everybody for the simple reason it was her fault. The board has been gutted and restructured. A few of the newer members seem to actually give a damn, but the damage was done. Residents are still angry about the pool situation and will blame the HOA, even if the board members are different. The funniest part, though, the HOA still had the nerve to try and ask about access to the pool after the dust settled. They sent me a formal letter requesting to lease the land from me, claiming it would be mutually beneficial. I ripped it up. I bought my home on land outside of an HOA for a reason. I like my peace and privacy. I followed the law. I didn't ask for trouble. An HOA leasing land from me seems like the definition of trouble. I have several folders proving to me that the HOA is trouble. They could have left me alone, but they didn't. And so they lost the one thing that made them feel important. Their crown jewel, their social hub, their source of revenue and pride, gone, owned, fenced off. And I did not have to break a single rule to do it. I think what I did should be a lesson to HOA as a whole, that you cannot just mess with whoever you want and expect not to have them fight back. Even if somebody lives within the HOA, you should not mess with them. People are just that, people. People have intricate emotions and get upset when they are screwed over. My only issue now is to decide what the heck I want to do with my other pool, the smaller one in my backyard. I don't really need 2 pools outside of it being a flex, and I'm not that kind of person. I feel like if I drain it and do something else back there, it could be like one final feud to the HOA to give them in the end what they were asking for the entire time. I don't know how much fun it would be, though, without Karen there to see it. And just to clarify to people, I do feel bad about the residents losing their pool. For most of them, it's not their fault they got stuck with a horrible HOA. I would not be surprised if some people moved here because of the fact that they would have access to a pool. So yeah, I admit that they got screwed over, but I still think it was the HOA's fault if they renewed their lease when they were meant to. I wouldn't have been able to buy the property. And yeah, guys, I'm curious. What do you think here? Was OP the a-hole for basically restricting pool access to every single resident of the HOA, or did he do the right thing? I would say the HOA tried to screw with OP and got screwed over in return. I think that's fair. Let me know what you think in the comments. A user in the comments wrote the following. Look, I get that Karen was annoying and overstepped, but your response was completely disproportionate. Yes, you had every legal right to buy that land, but just because you can do something does not mean you should. You took a minor neighborhood dispute and escalated it to the point where dozens of families lost access to a pool they had been paying for. Many of those residents probably had nothing to do with the harassment that you received. Some might have even moved to that neighborhood specifically for pool access. Kids who were looking forward to summer pool time got screwed over because of your vendetta. You also admit that you were abiding your time and enjoying the harassment because it gave you evidence. Well, that's pretty messed up. You could have shut this down with a cease and assist letter from your lawyer at any point, but instead you let it escalate because you wanted revenge. The whole thing reads like you were looking for an excuse to flex your wealth and power over people. You bought an entire piece of land just to spite an HOA president who sent you some nasty letters. That's rich person problems solved with rich person solutions, while regular families suffer the consequences. You say you feel bad for the residents, but not bad enough to work out any kind of compromise or access arrangement. You just wanted to win at any cost. And yeah, guys, would you agree with this one? I don't think OP was as much of a villain as this comment painted him to be. Anyway, another comment said, Karen and the AJ board were absolutely horrible here. Taking photos of your private property, sending fake fines, contacting your mortgage company, and refusing to acknowledge legal documents proving you were not under their jurisdiction. That is harassment, plain and simple. So Karen was clearly on a power trip and deserved to lose her position. But your response, while legally justified, was pretty ruthless. You essentially punished an entire community for one person's bad behavior. And yes, the HOA screwed up by not renewing the lease, but you actively worked to make sure they could not fix their mistake. You could have approached this differently, maybe negotiating with the HOA for them to call off Karen in exchange for you not buying the land, or at least giving them a chance to match your offer. The residents who lost pool access are the real victims here, though. They paid fees in good faith, and many probably had no idea about the harassment you were receiving. Some might have even disagreed with Karen's tactics if they had known, but they all got punished because of the actions of a few board members. You admit you enjoyed watching the harassment escalate because it gave you evidence for your revenge plot. That is pretty cold. A simple cease and desist letter could have stopped most of this, but you wanted the nuclear option. Karen was definitely the biggest a-hole for starting this whole mess, but you chose to be vindictive rather than taking the high road. Sometimes being legally right does not make you morally right. And now a third comment. This is honestly one of the most satisfying revenge stories I've ever read. You did absolutely nothing wrong here. You bought property specifically outside the HOA to avoid their nonsense, and they still decided to harass you about your pool on your land. The audacity is incredible. Karen literally trespassed to take photos of your property, sent you threatening letters with fake fines, contacted your mortgage company, ignored legal documents, and made anonymous, harassing phone calls. Seriously, you gave them every opportunity to back down when you showed up to their meeting with all your documentation. Instead of apologizing for the mistake, she doubled down and basically declared war on you. You did not start this fight, but you sure as hell finished it. The fact that you bought the land legally and they didn't even bother to renew their lease is 100% their own incompetence. You played by all the rules while they tried to bully you into submission. Now they are dealing with the consequences of having a power-hungry president who cared more about control than actually doing her job. I do feel bad for the innocent residents who lost pool access, but that's entirely on the HOA board's mismanagement, not you. You have zero obligation to let them use your property after they spend months harassing you. And yeah, guys, let me know in the comments with which of these three comments you agree with. Thank you very much for watching.